Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. And today we have a fairly quick battle for you, but before we get started, I just want to pause and take a longer look at this matchmaking screen because it is pretty hilarious. It's ranked battle, so there are only 7 ships per side. No light cruisers, because who's stupid enough to play light cruisers at high tier these days? I mean, when the matchmaker gives exactly the same weight to a Seattle or a Neptune as it does an Alaska or an Aegir, I mean, what the hell would you play a Seattle or a Neptune? Only one battleship on each team. And that Vladivostok and Massachusetts must be feeling real nervous right now because each team also has 4 destroyers. Although I do have to feel a certain amount of sympathy for the Asashio on the enemy team because his deep water torpedoes can only hit, let alone damage, 1 ship in this particular matchmaking, and his guns are terrible. So, hey, you picks your ship, you takes your chance. I wouldn't recommend that Asashio player buys any lottery tickets in the immediate future. Digital Demon here, on the other hand, has an amazingly good ship. Well, in general, not just in this matchmaking. The Japanese Tier 9 gunboat, the Kitakaze. There was a time, believe it or not, when Wargaming really tried to balance everything in World of Warships under the same rule set. And by that I mean no special gimmicks, where they tried to have everything work under the same basic mechanics. Like high explosive penetration, for example, where the amount of armour that you could penetrate was equal to 1/6 of the calibre of your gun. And that worked in the beginning, in like the first year or so after World of Warships was released, because there weren't that many ships and that many different nations and that many different lines of ships within the nations for them to worry about balancing. But as you keep adding new nations with new gimmicks and new lines of ships within those nations with different capabilities, it was the kind of thing that was just unsustainable. I mean, when the Akazuki, Kitakaze and Harugumo were introduced with their 100mm guns, they couldn't even penetrate the armour of same tier destroyers with their high explosive shells. And to a certain degree this was absolutely fine. It just meant that players of these ships had to start using their armour piercing shells every now and then. At least until they had a captain with enough skill points to be able to get the inertia fuse for high explosive shell skill, which buffed the penetration of the high explosives. This at least meant that they were able to do consistent damage against same or higher tier destroyers without having to engage their brains, but they still struggled to do damage against same or higher tier cruisers, and same or higher tier battleships were virtually untouchable once the superstructures had been saturated. The downside to this, of course, was that even though it worked under the existing rule set, it did require a substantial investment in commander skill points, and you often had to choose between IFHE as your first 4-point skill or concealment, and you really needed both before these ships could be considered even vaguely playable by the majority of the player base. Skilled players could still make it work, of course, because skilled players always find a way of making things work. That's why they're skilled players. But it was a lot more hard work than playing gunboat type destroyers of any other nation. So Wargaming just kind of gave up trying to have everything work under the same rules, and they gave bonus high explosive penetration to the Akazuki, the Kitakaze and the Harugumo for no good reason whatsoever. They said, there you go, now you don't need to have the IFHE skill. Meanwhile, the high-tier British destroyers with 113mm guns, who were suffering from exactly the same problems, were saying, and what about us? Nah, it'll be fine. To be fair, it's not like the daring needs buffs. So, to a degree, they were right, it is fine. Oh, hello, Mr. Yugano. You've been spotted in open water by a Kitakaze and an Akazuki. How much fun do you think he's having right now? I'm going to go with not a lot. But the thing is, the buff that they gave to the high explosive penetration of Japanese 100mm guns had, well, let's be generous and say, unintended consequences. Because the purpose of giving them this buff was to ensure that they didn't need to take IFHE as their first 4-point skill. But that doesn't mean they weren't going to do it anyway, because with IFHE on top, of the band-aid that had been applied to their high explosive penetration, they could wreck battleships now as well. But yeah, Wargaming didn't completely give up on the idea of trying to balance everything under the same rule set. Do you remember when they redid cruiser armour? Because they'd gotten to the stage where they'd slapped so many different exceptions and band-aids and gimmicks on top of the existing game mechanics that you were in the ridiculous situation where you had cruisers that... You had a whole bunch of cruisers, mostly the light cruisers here, but you had a whole bunch of cruisers that couldn't even reliably and consistently penetrate the armour of same or one tier higher cruisers. So, the cruiser armour rework. There you go. Now everybody's playing on the same playing field. Except for the Atlanta and the Flint. Who only had 127mm guns, and still required the IFHE skill to be able to damage anything other than destroyers. So all of the Atlanta and Flint players were like, so can we get an exception as well? And Wargaming was like, nah, it'll be fine. Oh, Wargaming, you so silly. Meanwhile, Digital Demon has launched an incredibly speculative torpedo salvo there. Widespread, not aiming at anything in particular, sinks the Yugamo anyway. And there's the First Blood Award. And of course he's running Yamamoto Isoroku as his captain. So the First Blood Award just activated the Emergency Reserves talent specific to this captain, which gave him an extra charge on all of his consumables. And here comes the Mogador. Now there aren't many ships because the concealment on the Kitakazi isn't great. There are not many ships that the Kitakazi is going to outspot, but the Mogador is one of them. Digital Demon popped his smoke, but he was the one who was spotting the Mogador, and I don't think he anticipated the friendly black using his radar, because he was already leaving the smoke screen in an attempt to reacquire the Mogador as a target. And the Mogador can be an extremely dangerous ship to fight, even if you're in something of a DPM monster like the Kitakazi, because while the base reload of its 139mm guns isn't fantastic, it does have a main battery reload booster. So he's taken a fair amount of damage from the Mogador, but he's not taken as much as he could because the Mogador was forced to nose in towards him in order to avoid the torpedoes that he launched, which limited the number of gun turrets that were available to fire. Plus, Mogador was kind of caught in a bit of a crossfire between Digital Demon's Kitakazi and the Black who radared him. Still, that's a lot of damage, and he's on fire with his damage control on cooldown, so he's going to continue to take damage. Getting shot at by the Albemarle there. Even more damage. Damage control just came off cooldown. He was able to extinguish the fire. Oh, yes, if you shoot now at the Aegir, the Albemarle will see you. He's going to take the risk, isn't he? He is. Although, the smoke screen that he laid when he was fighting the Mogador is still there, so the second he neutralises the Aegir and gains his third kill, the Aegir is no longer spotting him, the Albemarle can't see him because there's a smoke screen in the way, which the Akazuki has also taken full advantage of, while popping out of the smoke screen just to reacquire the Albemarle, then nose back into Digital Demon's smoke screen, and the two of them are now lighting up that British heavy cruiser with their armour piercing. Akazuki as well, is it? Yes, yeah, they're both using armour piercing on a broadside cruiser, because you'll just do more damage. At least until the broadside cruiser starts angling away, at which point you probably want to switch back to that high explosive. Smoke screen's expired. They're now in open water. The Akazuki is ducking back into cover behind the island, but, well, yeah, I don't really think they have much to worry about with the Albemarle turning. His guns aren't going to be pointing this way. Quickly checks his flanks. Yes, there is an enemy Kitakazi over there, but he's on the far side of an island. He's not in a position to shoot. It's really just the Albemarle, as they continue to rain high explosive death and destruction down on that poor heavy cruiser. You know, actually, I think there might be something else. Oh yeah, the Asashio's just popped up down to the southeast. Only for a couple of seconds, but as soon as he disappeared, they're no longer detected, because it'd be impossible for the Albemarle to actually see them on the far side of this island. So the Albemarle's just run out of things to shoot back at. And he's about to die. It's just a question of who gets this kill. And it's Digital Demon, kill number 4. That just leaves 3 enemy ships, the Kitakazi and the Asashio, which we know are both over there, and that Massachusetts, who I'm pretty sure is still over there somewhere as well. There goes the Alaska's radar. That's extremely bad news for the enemy Kitakazi and the Asashio. What's even worse news is that they are inside shooting range. And oh, I don't think you wanted to do that, Kitakazi. He's managed to ground himself. Is he going to be able to sneak out of there? It's going to take him some time to build up speed. The Kitakazi is a lot of things, but fast it is not. He's sweating bullets over there, trying to get out of here and go undetected. And I think he might have grounded himself again, because he's definitely not safe there, and he's immobile. Come on, Digital Demon. For the Kraken Unleashed. You can do it. And he has done it. And of course, because he has Isiroko Yamamoto as his captain, there's the second wind talent, which after trading all that health with the Mogador, has given him a much needed heal, which he definitely needed. And also a 34% faster reload buff, which in this thing he really didn't need, but I'm sure he's definitely not going to turn his nose up at. And there's the Massachusetts. Now the Massachusetts, of course, considering that there were 4 destroyers in this battle, has done extremely well surviving as long as he has, but is a terrifying opponent to fight in any kind of destroyer because of its devastating secondaries, and they are definitely inside the Massachusetts secondary gun battery range. But the Massachusetts secondaries are only really scary if they can see something to shoot at, and destroyers have smoke screens. So pop the smoke, commence farming. If you're easily upset, you may want to turn your face away from the monitor at this point. I mean, they've flooded the area with torpedoes as well, to try to anticipate the Massachusetts dodging, but it's not the torpedoes that are going to sink this guy. Is it just me, or does anybody else feel a little bit dirty watching this? It's not just me, is it? Well, the Massachusetts is definitely going down. And there's kill number 6. If this was World of Tanks, that would be a Top Gun, and that just leaves the Asashio. Now, if ever there was a guy that was bringing torpedoes to a gunfight, this is it. This poor guy doesn't even have torpedoes that can damage anybody on the team that he's fighting, and his guns are pretty terrible. So, yeah. And there is kill number 7. And yes, you did just see Digital Demon in the Kitakazi knocking out every single ship on the enemy team. And that is definitely not something that you see every day. So while you're all busy collecting your jaw from the floor, I'm going to leave you there. That's it. Hope you enjoyed it. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.